Good afternoon and good morning to wherever you are in the world. Hi, I'm Dan Stoll, bringing you today Matt Spears to the Process Pros panel. Now, Matt is a process excellence guru and has a fantastic blog over at simplifyingprocesses.com. I think I said that right.
That's right.
Yeah. And today we're going to be talking about frameworks within your organization and, why you should be having one. Do you have one? Do you need one? And I guess let's say we're on that path to digital transformation and I've got my vision. I need to automate stuff. Do I need a framework to get that done?
Yeah. Well, thanks, first of all, Dan, for having me. And, you know, yeah, I think you do need a framework. Now, if we're going to be technical about it, do you have to have a framework in order to start automating processes? Well, no, you don't. I think a lot of automation gets done without a framework. But the question really would be, can we automate as effectively as we should or as responsibly as we should without a framework? And I would argue that you really can't. And so to help answer that, it might be helpful to explain what a process framework is. And in the most simplest way I could put it, a process framework is really a method for not just arranging and organizing your processes within your business, but also identifying them. And so the way that a framework works is that you look at a very high level at your business and you identify those key high level processes that string together sequentially, that relate to one another sequentially, that produce value. And so essentially your focus is on the customer who's at the end of that value chain. And you're identifying all of those things that go into building that value for your customer. And then there's a set of processes that kind of sit beneath that, that we would refer to as support or management processes that really are those value enabling processes. So it helps you identify from a very high level how you do what you do within your business. But it also helps you identify below that high level, which is where most automation takes place, right? You're not automating the develop new products process, for example, right? That's a very high level process. You're probably automating, a level of that process that's 2 or 3 levels below. That really is a component of that larger develop new products process. And a framework can help you understand what those processes are, arrange them, and then organize them in a way that makes sense to the business, and can also kind of give you a checklist, as it were, for pursuing automation.
Right. And I guess it solves like one of those issues around, I guess, hour burn, right? Like if you don't have a framework, and you, as you said, on the technical level, sure. Do you need a framework to go off and start automating stuff? Not really.
Mm.
And you can spend, weeks automating something without a framework. Would a framework allow you that, I guess, that structure to reduce, I guess, that time to automate something? So, because you've got a much clearer definition of what you need to automate and how it
Mm.
fits into the bigger picture, reducing, I guess, that the unknowns and the rework that comes with, hey, automating something, does it work? Great. Oh, it doesn't fit into this. Okay, we need to rework that, et cetera, et
Mhm.
cetera.
Yeah, it can help with that. It can help with reducing defects once you get to the point of actually automating, because you understand more accurately what happens upstream, what are those downstream dependencies. Because processes, and this is another kind of a beautiful piece of having a framework, is processes in a business really don't exist in silos, right? They very rarely exist in a vacuum. Uh, you would be really hard pressed to find a process within a business that doesn't impact another process within the business. Now, if you start automating one of those processes, now you have these cascading impacts that are happening across other processes, and a framework can help you be aware of what those things might be and reduce some of those defects. But I would say also a framework is going to help you automate the right processes. So when we start talking about this idea of process management, being managing and optimizing business processes to improve company performance, well, is it realistic that we're going to manage and optimize every single process that exists within an organization? Now, if you have a very small business, it's probably more possible. But if you have a larger business, like a medium or large size business, it's my estimation, it's probably not realistic to think that you're going to manage and automate everything within the business, because it costs money, it takes resources to do those things, right? And those things are both limited within different businesses. And so a framework can help you identify the right starting point, the right place to invest those limited automation process management resources. So I think it's going to reduce defects, like you were saying, Dan, once you get to automation, but also it's going to help you identify the best place to invest those automation resources that you have.
Right. And now with that, in terms of, I guess, is there when you talk about frameworks, I mean, are people going to have to start from scratch to sort of map out what their framework is, or like project management, where you've got um, Prince 2 and black belts and all these other types of methodologies about project management. Is there a similar thing for process management, or process frameworks, in terms of, hey, how can I get started? I don't know how to build a framework for process management. Is there
Yeah.
is there some methodologies I can follow?
Yeah, definitely. There are reusable, what are called reusable frameworks or templates that are available out there. And because really, again, what is a framework? Well, it's a systematic way to identify and arrange the processes within your business, starting at a very high level, and then working downward from there. And then, of course, the closer that we get to the ground, where value is actually generated, where the customer is impacted, that's where those automation opportunities and things typically exist. But getting started with that, you would have to understand first and foremost, what do we do as a business? You and I work at Nintex. We provide software solutions to customers in the space of process management, process automation, right across that spectrum of process excellence, essentially. And so, what are our high level value creating processes? Well, it would certainly be, business development and marketing, and then software development and delivery, right, and providing those software solutions to customers. But then we have those other supporting processes that come underneath, right? We have a payroll that we have to manage because we have employees. We have a risk department. We have payables that have to go out, all those things. So a framework's going to help you identify all of that. So when you're starting to say, okay, how do I even begin here? It would, the first thing would be identifying what is it that we do as an organization. Now, you can leverage, as I was saying, some reusable frameworks to kind of get started, some templates. There are a handful of them out there. The one that I tend to go to and tend to recommend to customers as a good starting point is the APQC Process Classification Framework, apqc.org. They're not affiliated with Nintex whatsoever, but they have a ton of great free resources on their website. And they have a cross-industry, essentially an industry neutral process classification framework that lays out 13 categories at the highest level. And then they drill down within each of those categories, 5 different levels to define process information more granularly, kind of as you move down. So definitely check out apqc.org and download their free cross-industry process classification framework. That's a good starting point. Now, one disclaimer here, Dan, because a lot of customers, when you make a recommendation like this, and we actually go to check it out with them, one of the concerns is, well, this terminology, I kind of recognize what it's saying, but it's not really familiar to our business. I don't know if all of it applies to our business. I can think of some things that our business has, but I don't see it represented in the framework. Does that mean the framework is, not valuable? And to that, I would say that's to be expected. Okay, so you want to use the framework as a starting point. It's not your ending point. Okay, so the goal would not be to take APQC's process classification framework and one for one transfer everything over into your process management system. But it would be essentially a good place to say, okay, here are those 13 high level categories. How can I personalize this for our particular business using terminology that's familiar within the organization? And then going through those various levels, those 5 levels, starting at the highest level, which is a category, moving into process group, down to a process, and then activities and tasks. Uh, how can I customize this to make it fit what works within our business? So that's a really good starting point. It's one I will almost always recommend to someone who is not quite sure where to begin. But don't expect that you can just pick it up and make a one-for-one transfer. You're going to want to customize it, personalize it for your particular business.
Right, yeah. The work hasn't been done for you. You're just going to have to put some skin in the game, right?
That's right. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the great thing about these things is a lot of the work has been done. There's been a lot of a lot of smart people that have invested their time and energy to pull these things together. And so I think we would be losing something if we didn't at least reference it. So even if you really have a good understanding of what your framework is within your business, not a bad idea to go and check out something like an APQC PCF and just do a cross check. Hey, did I catch everything that I needed to catch, or are there some gaps, and maybe this can help fill that in?
Yeah. And I was just going to just point out as well, I think you created some templates for ProMap for the APQC framework. Yeah. So if any of you are ProMap customers, I think you can head to the gallery.nintex.com and grab those, which get you on the way to using those frameworks as well. Now, Matt, tell me about, I guess, let's say we've got our vision, we know what we want to do, we've got our strategy,
Mhm.
we've started building out our framework. How important is it to keep that framework relevant and updated, just like you would with your processes?
Yeah. Well, it's going to change, right? That's to be expected. So the business is changing, whether it's from internal demands on the business forcing change, external demands. Your business is changing all the time, and so the framework is going to adapt with that. Now, most of your changes are probably going to be. So if we think about, let's using kind of APQC as an example, those 13 high level categories. The higher you are in a framework, the less likely changes are to occur. Okay, so that would be a fundamental change to your business, right? If you're changing high level what it is we're doing. But the lower you get, the more granular you get within a framework, that's where the changes would typically occur. So at the process level, at the group level, even, or especially at the activity and task level, there's going to be a lot of changes happening there, and that's just part and parcel with process management. So I would say expect those changes to occur, but then we get into a discussion around how do we even recognize when change is happening? How do we make those changes to the framework? And then that brings in discussion of process governance and accountability, responsibility within a business, and that's part of a larger process management program. But I would say it is natural to expect the process framework to change over time.
Right. Now, something that comes up quite often, and sorry if I feel like I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm just scatterbraining with ideas right now. Do you have to have technology to make this happen, right?
Mhm.
Obviously, a lot of companies, especially on the larger side, already have process technology, whether it be automation technology, mapping, business process mapping type technology. Some
Yeah.
organizations may not. They might be using spreadsheets and notepads, right? If you need to get started on this journey before you can, one, justify the expense of technology, or two, justify the resources to go and build it in existing technology,
Mhm.
what do you need? Do you need a big set of tools to just get started and actually produce something of worth, or is PowerPoint all that you need?
PowerPoint, Excel, a whiteboard. You don't really need technology to do that. Now, of course, making changes to it is easier in technology. If I start sketching all of it out on a whiteboard, I'm going to be limited there. But if to your point, especially if you need to prove some of this, or at least which would not be unexpected, that I need to have a path forward, some sort of a vision to where we're headed, and how does a framework kind of come in and support that, helping people, especially decision makers, understand where you're going with this sort of an effort. Excel, PowerPoint, those are good starting points in terms of identifying high level process categories. Now let me take those categories and kind of break it down. What are the process groups within those categories, and then what are the individual processes that go into making up that group, right? So those are things that you can do, fairly inexpensively using Excel, PowerPoint, tools like that.
Now, in your blog post, which I will show right now, you talk about the PCF levels.
Yeah.
Can you just explain to us, what those are and how they fit into all this?
Yeah, so they're all part of the frame. So when we talk about process framework, the levels make up the framework. So at the very top level, this would be the highest level of work description. Essentially, are called categories in APQC, and so they would break the categories up into two different components. The blog goes on and details how that happens, but essentially they would have you would have operating processes, which are synonymous with terminology like core processes or primary processes. Those are common ways to describe the high-level value chain of a business. Typically, you're probably going to have 5 or 6 processes there that work together to generate value for your customer. At that high level 1 category, you're also going to have support and management processes. These are the back of house processes I was mentioning earlier, things like HR, IT, finance, risk management, that sort of thing. Those go into making sure that your core processes can function as they should function. Now, in APQC, level 1 categories disaggregate or decompose or break down into level 2 process groups. Those level 2 process groups break down into level 3 processes. When we talk about a business process, when most people think of a flow chart or a diagram in their head, they're thinking of a level 3 business process, right? That's kind of the normal level set when we're talking about what a process is. But level 3 processes contain activities. Activities contain tasks. So think about tasks as granular level work instructions, mouse clicks, keyboard strokes, that sort of level of detail. And activities as being handoffs in a process. So that's kind of how the information decomposes or breaks down from high level categories down to level 2 groups, level 3 processes, level 4 activities, level 5 tasks. And there's some images and things on the blog that will help kind of bring that to life if people are interested.
Yeah, nice. No, I just put the link there for people to be able to go and check it out. So it's fair to say frameworks are like a pretty important part of discovering what processes you have before you even like go off and start automating anything, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And where in the organization would something like this sit? Is it a project manager thing? Is it the person actually doing the automating? Is it a business person who specializes in optimization? Where does this function fit? And if you don't have that organization within your company,
Mm-hmm.
how do you get started if you've got an interest in this kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. So a lot of times this is going to sit in bigger enterprises. You're going to have a center of excellence. You're going to have a process excellence, process focused, operational excellence team, whatever the name is. This responsibility would typically fall there for creating the framework. If you don't have that, then maybe you have a few individuals that are process focused as part of their role. It would fall there otherwise. Or if you really have no structure at all, it might just be an advocate, right? Someone who is a champion of this, but it's not really a formal part of their role. And if that's the case, you're probably not creating a framework for the entire enterprise. You're probably creating a framework for a part of the enterprise, which is fine. That's a fine starting point, right? It's better than not having one, and it's certainly better than jumping in and just saying, okay, hey, I've got this new automation technology, or I want to invest in that, and where should we use it? So even if you're doing it at a value stream segment or a departmental level, it's still going to be you're still going to have some advantages there. So center of excellence for big organizations is probably where it sits. Process titled individuals for maybe those medium-sized organizations, and then if you don't have any of that, maybe it's just a champion who is passionate about it and has been given the authority to kind of move forward with some of these things.
Yeah, and we all know those people that love frameworks and methodologies and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, really, the key thing is, Dan, is just to kind of get started. So who isn't pursuing some sort of digital transformation
Right.
in 2022? I think everyone is is putting some sort of effort into that bucket. Now, maybe they're not calling it that. Maybe it's operational excellence or process excellence. But regardless, all of those sorts of efforts can be supplemented and bolstered by having a well-defined process framework so that you can organize and arrange your processes, but also you can identify and what the processes actually are. And then, kind of a step, the process framework would be sort of that first step. If you have automation in view, then there would be, prioritization. Now that we know what our processes are, how do we prioritize the right place to start? And then once we've done prioritization, now we can start applying automation. And so really it all starts with having an understanding of how you do what you do. And that's where framework comes in.
Awesome. Well, thanks very much, mate. Thanks for joining me. And for those who want to read up more about this and subsequent topics, Matt has a fantastic blog, as I mentioned at the start of the call, Simplifying Processes. I'll pop it back up on the screen just quickly. A lot of great content, a lot of great resources there, linking out to one of the ones we talked about here, the APCQ website, which goes into a lot more detail around what those frameworks are to give you some starting points, building out some frameworks within your organization. And on that, thanks very much, Matt, and I'll catch you folks next week.
Thanks, Dan.